All right, welcome to the Krueg Show. We keep things rolling on a Friday, 1 o'clock on the West Coast, 4 o'clock on the East Coast. And appreciate every single one of you guys for joining us. Welcome to the Pig and a Pickle Krueg Show, brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. Also brought to you by New York Style Italian Sausage. They had a wonderful party last night in Santa Clara, was doing a lot of drinking and eating and talking with the folks down there. Thanks to Marin Auto Glass. MarinAutoGlass.com is one of our sponsors. And we're also brought to you by both Underdog Fantasy and Mojo Fantasy. And if you check the link in the description on either and use that promo code Krueg, K-R-U-E-G, they'll match you for your first $100. And everybody who signs up at Mojo is automatically entered into a drawing to win a Purdy or a Bosa jersey, which will be awarded in the postgame show after Niners Seahawks on Thanksgiving night. Al Sacco's in the house, one of our favorites covering the 49ers. Al, how are you, man?
I'm doing great, Larry. Thanks for having me on.
Well, hey, thanks for coming on. And you know, one of the things I was just driving around with my kid earlier today, and he's 14. He's a big NFL fan. We were talking about how Joe Burrow's out done for the year, and we got into this quarterback conversation, and then, you know, I was looking at my next week, kind of looking ahead to next week, and I was thinking, oh, well, we got to get Dave Softy Mahler on. So I texted Softy, who's, I don't know if you're familiar with Softy up in the Pacific Northwest, but I said, Softy, you want to come on next week? And he's like, yeah, how about Monday or Tuesday? So we're working on that. And he's a big UW Huskies nut. So I'm like, dude, Michael Penix is just crazy good. I go, Michael Penix has got to be going high in the first round. He says, no, he's going to go probably late first at the highest. And I think to myself, man, I haven't seen too many quarterbacks throw the ball better than Michael Penix. Anyway, it led us back to a conversation about Brock Purdy with me and my son. And the question was, where would Brock Purdy go in this next NFL draft? Knowing what we know now about Purdy, knowing what we know about rookie quarterbacks, and obviously it's a great class, right? You got Caleb Williams, and you got Michael Penix, and you got Drake May, and there's a few others there. Bo Nix. Where would Purdy go if he were in the 2024 NFL draft?
If you know he's Brock Purdy, if you know he's going to be what he is right now.
Yeah, knowing what you know right now.
He's a top 5 pick for sure. I mean, for sure. I don't know if people are going to think, and I'm with the college stuff, it's so hard to project because you never know, right? Most of these QBs are busts. Caleb Williams, if people do still think he's a generational talent, he would maybe, I still think, go first overall. But if you know what you're getting out of Purdy, just like with Kirk Cousins, if you knew Kirk Cousins was going to be Kirk Cousins in the draft he would have been probably the second overall pick. Right? I mean, if you know you're getting that kind of production, it was Andrew Luck was in that draft, right? So it would have been Luck and then Cousins, I still think. But if you know you're getting that kind of production, you're getting a quarterback who right now leads the NFL in passer rating as we're approaching Thanksgiving. He's a top 5 pick for sure. Would he come in and be successful on a team that's terrible around him? Probably not. Not a lot of quarterbacks would. But if you know you're getting that, I would be hard pressed to see a team not take him. Top 2,
so
3,
it's Caleb Williams, Drake May, Michael Penix Jr., J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, Deion's kid, Shedeur Sanders, Jaden Daniels from LSU, maybe Quinn Ewers from Texas if he doesn't go back, Cam Ward from Wazoo. These are the quarterbacks projected to go top 100.
And maybe 2 or 3 of them are going to hit, right, based on what we know and what we've seen. So it's a crapshoot.
It is a total crapshoot. I like Penix the most. I like him more than Caleb. I like him more than I mean, he just throws such an incredible ball. I'm starting to like Bo Nix. Now, I don't know how much of that is Oregon's offense versus him, but I saw him at Auburn. He was a playmaker at Auburn and a much different offense. So he's got 29 touchdowns and 2 picks. I mean, he's been incredible.
Let me tell you what, the NFL absolutely needs this influx of quarterbacks. We've seen the guys that are playing right now in some of these offenses. They need an influx of good quarterbacks. And I'm looking at your comments, and I'm going to stop. But everybody's saying that like Purdy would be a 5th rounder. If you knew Brock Purdy was Brock Purdy and you put him in an NFL draft and you said this is what this quarterback's going to do or be, he's absolutely going top 5. A sure thing like that. Come on. Come
I
on.
know it's funny. There are so many people though that are still in this kind of we don't know what Brock is kind of a mode. I think now that we're okay, so it was brought up this week. Brock, hey, you've now played a full NFL season. You've had 7 games, and his 17 game numbers are damn good.
Oh yeah,
68%, and it's like 31 touchdowns and whatever it is, 6 or 7 picks or 8 picks or whatever it is. Really the number 1 quarterback rating, which would be number 1 in the league the last 2 years. You know, and I feel like we now know what Brock Purdy is. I think we've seen the good and the bad of Brock Purdy. I think the good is what he is. Super competitive, plays with a chip on his shoulder, processes what he sees, smart as a whip, super competitive, the ball comes out on time with accuracy. And I think what the downside of Brock Purdy, I think we've already seen as well, which is he threw 33 picks in college. He gets a little aggressive. He gets a little loose with the ball. He tries to make plays that he probably can't make time to time. And so there's going to be some turnovers along the way. That to me is kind of, and if he can be patient and check it down more and be a little bit more like, let's say, a young Alex Smith, take care of the football instead of being this Brett Favre, gunslinger, which is kind of what his natural inclination is. I think that will help him down the road. But I think we've seen what Brock is, good and bad. I don't think there's anything left to see as far as positives or negatives. I think he's shown both. Where are you on Purdy? Because I think there's a lot of people that feel like there's still massive regression to come, and I think they're going to be waiting a long time.
Yeah, I agree. And if I had a couple stats that I've tweeted these out and I talked about them on the show. The first is, so his passer rating right now is 109.9. So that leads the league. He's 24, he's 23 years old. He'll be 24 at the end of December. If he ends up leading the league, he'll be the youngest quarterback to do it since Dan Marino did it when he was 22. Tua led last year at 24 years old, and Nick Foles also led 1 year at 24 years old. But this season is mostly Brock at 23. That's how good he's been. He's also been the only quarterback, the second quarterback, Kurt Warner being the other one, with 3 TDs and 140 plus passer rating in 3 games, at least 3 games in his first 2 seasons. So he's doing things that we haven't seen done. And like you mentioned, his numbers are fantastic. It's like 28 touchdowns over his first 17 games. If he keeps on this pace, he's going to throw for more yards than any 49ers QB in history in a season. And I know that there's an extra game this year, but the only QBs to ever throw for 4,000 on the Niners were Garcia and Steve Young, and Purdy's on a pace to eclipse both of them. Purdy's like on a 4,400 yard pace, I think, right now. And yeah, he makes mistakes. He makes some throws that are, like you said, Brett Favre-like is a good way to do it, where his first touchdown against Jacksonville was one of those throws where you're like, no, what are you doing? And then it lands in Ayuk's hands, and you're like, okay, just don't ever do it again. But he made it work.
No. Yes.
Yeah, no. Yes, it was totally one of those. But that's that play and his touchdown pass to Kittle. So I don't know if he wanted Ayuk over the middle or he was just pump faking, whatever he was. But the pocket collapses, and he hits Kittle on the long pass on the outside. So whether he knew Kittle was on the outside and he pump faked because he wanted to get it there, whatever the reason was. But that's a play that we've seen Jimmy Garoppolo get sacked there. How many times have we seen that play get hit by a Niners quarterback recently? Almost never on a route like that to the outside, 66 yards downfield for a touchdown. So
and I asked Kittle about, not to interrupt you, I asked Kittle about that yesterday, and I said, were you surprised that he had that arm strength to get it out there? Not because he doesn't have the arm strength, just because he had cocked it back and he was in a muddied pocket. He didn't get to look like he didn't follow through. He definitely didn't step into it. And he not only did he get the ball down the field to Kittle, who had a step and a half on Devin Lloyd, but he let him. He, if anything, he put it out there for him. So, and I thought Kittle would have said, yeah, I was surprised at the arm strength he had on that one. He's like, no, I expect that from Brock. So.
Yeah, I mean, it might have been the best throw of Purdy's career, right up there, I thought. And look, does Brock have faults? Sure. He can't make the turnovers that we saw before the bye. He's got to be safer with the ball, especially at the end of games. But the other thing with him, yeah, you're always talking about regression. Everybody's expecting regression because of where he was picked and maybe some of his physical traits, although I think he has underrated physical traits. But everybody's talking about regression instead of, well, what if there's not regression? What if he's going to get better because he's a quarterback in his second year? He's 23. If one of these other quarterbacks that were any of these quarterbacks, let's take the 2021 quarterbacks who are mostly a disaster, right? Even Trevor Lawrence is not. He has more turnovers than touchdown passes this year. If one of those guys was playing like Brock is playing in his second season at 23 years old, your Zach Wilson, your Justin Fields, your Mac Jones, Trey Lance, these guys who are taken high, they're the second coming, right? Oh my God, look at what they're doing, and they're just going to get better. But because where Brock was taken, and some people think physically, they're waiting for the regression to happen. And like you said, we may be waiting a really long time. He may just be to the point where he's just a really solid NFL quarterback. And if he's in the right system, and mostly all quarterbacks, unless you're Patrick Mahomes, are mostly system quarterbacks. Like you have to have a good system to play in and good players around you. If he's a solid quarterback in a good system, and Kyle Shanahan has a good system, he plays for the 49ers. He doesn't play for the Commanders or the Giants. He plays for the 49ers. And he's a great fit for that system. And as long as it stays that way, there's no reason he can't continue to have success there.
And it's funny. All I would say to anybody is listen to who's complimenting him and listen to who's ripping him. People ripping him are content creators and Nick Wright. People complimenting him, Mike Martz, Kurt Warner, Alex Smith, Peter King, Kyle Shanahan. The people who are complimenting Brock are far more have far more football credibility than the people that are ripping Brock Purdy. He's made 17 starts. The Niners have gone 13-4 in those 17 starts. He ranks second in the NFL in QBR, first in yards per attempt, sixth in completion rate at 68.1%, which is right on line with what he did at Iowa State. Fifth in touchdown passes with 31, third in touchdown to interception ratio at 3.9. So the guy's played really, really well. And yet, people will point to, through 9 games this year, he has 14 turnover-worthy plays, 6 most in the NFL, and that comes after he had 7 in 10 games last year. That's the pushback. But you mentioned he leads the NFL in yards per attempt since becoming the Niner quarterback. And, all those stats about air yards, he's higher than Mahomes and several other NFL quarterbacks in all those stats as well. So, the old saying, stats lie, liars use statistics. You can pull out any stat to tell you anything and paint any picture you want.
Right.
At the end of the day, the guy's playing pretty good ball, and they're winning a lot of games.
What showed me the most about him, I thought too, is young quarterbacks, especially, the confidence can be so fragile. And he played 3 of probably his worst games of his career. Well, I thought he played well in the previous 2 going up, like against Minnesota until the turnovers, and against Cincinnati until the turnovers. I thought he had some good moments, but those are moments that can shatter somebody's confidence, right? Look at Mac Jones. Look at Zach Wilson. They have no confidence.
Yeah.
Purdy has that stuff happen. He has a bye week to listen to everybody talk shit about him, right? How awful he is, and we're getting ready for Sam Darnold. And he comes back and throws for 296 and 3 touchdowns and is in complete control. None of that bothered him. And as a quarterback, that's what I want. I want my quarterback to be confident to say, like, you know what? Yeah, I didn't play well, but I don't care. I'm going to roll out and try to throw this ball to Brandon Ayuk over 2 people. I want that kind of confidence. So that's important that he came back. I thought that Jacksonville game said a lot about him. Is he going to go and is he going to be a shell of himself? Is he going to play scared? No, you want to play confident again. So you want that in a quarterback. You want your quarterback to be confident. You want your quarterback to forget about mistakes. You want your quarterback, I don't want him to be arrogant, but you want your quarterback to be a little cocky. You want to follow that guy. So I was really impressed with the way he came back. And the only thing that's going to answer these questions about Purdy is time, right? If in a year from now he's still doing well, in 2 years from now. But what we're seeing at the moment, and what we've seen here quarterback-wise the past few years, I don't know what people should be happy. Fans should be happy with what they've seen from him.
No doubt. It's something where, it's like, I think there were just a lot of people who were sold on Trey Lance, and they don't want to admit they were wrong. And then there's a lot of people that their only real point of comparison is Jimmy Garoppolo, and they felt burned by Jimmy. I believed in Jimmy, and I looked up, and Jimmy was no good. And so, you know what? This guy can't be any good. This is I want to share the screen on this one, Al, because to me, this is a question that I had asked Purdy, not this week. This is last week. Let me just show this to you. I'm going to play it off my Twitter. This is a question I asked him about last week about the bye week.
My fiance and her family on the farm.
Basically, I said, how'd you spend your bye week? And you mentioned how he wasn't bothered too much by that other guys get broken by all the criticism. Listen to how he answered the question about how he spent his bye week, and then we'll talk.
Yeah, I went to Iowa. I was with my fiance and her family on the farm. Sort of just got away from everything, and then went back to Iowa State for a game. Saw everybody. Just sort of have a perspective of, all right, this is life. This is what's going on. Yeah, I'm playing in the NFL for the 49ers, but I still have a good life with my fiance and everything to come. So it was good just to be able to breathe and get my mind and my thoughts, everything together, and regroup for what's to come for the second half of the season. So it was good for me.
Just when you hear him talk like that, just to breathe a little bit. And sometimes you wonder if the criticism, gets to these guys, or if how much are they hearing it. I think that's a pretty good example right there, that clearly he's hearing it. Clearly it was therapeutic for him to go to Iowa, sit on a tractor, get back to his roots, go to Iowa State, be around some people that really, love him and care about him, and kind of not listen to the noise of, he's not good enough. They're not good enough. They're not, that whole negativity drumbeat. I wonder if that had something to do with his ability to kind of flip the page and get his mind right for Jacksonville.
He's just a grounded dude. I just feel like you're wired that way. You either are or you are. It's not something you can, if you just kind of naturally have anxiety or things get to you, he's just wired. He just seems like a smooth guy, confident guy. And again, that's the person that I want behind center. And it's funny too. You brought up like the Garoppolo and Lance stuff. I was talking about this with Brian on our last show. So if you go back to last year when Brock played against the Bucs, that was to me like, things were so toxic with the fan base. Okay. So you had Jimmy versus Trey, and it was people going at each other, and it was just this guy versus that guy. I felt when Purdy came in that game and he just lit up the Bucs, it was the fan base kind of united, where it was like, wow, look at this guy. This is great. And everybody was just sort of behind one guy. It was a little bit refreshing. So it's cool that he's going back against the Bucs this game, and to kind of go back and talk about that and relive that, because I really felt that was kind of like a unifying moment for the fan base. I mean, there was still some stuff this offseason with the Trey Lance stuff and the preseason and everything else, but for at least a time, everybody was kind of unified. And yeah, this is awesome. Nobody saw this guy coming. He could really be somebody on this team, and he has been. Again, if you told me after the Bucs game we'd be where we are right now, I'd have signed up for it in a heartbeat. That he's played as well as he had, that he was good in the playoffs, played as well as he had, came back from the injury, had some step backs, which is inevitable for a young quarterback. And it looks like to this point responded to them with a good game, and he's ready to do well again. So from that point on the Bucs game to where we are now with the Bucs game, I think everybody would have signed up for what we're seeing with Purdy. And again, I don't know when it's going to stop with the criticism of him. Maybe it is just time. A year or 2, 3 years, whatever. I don't know. But again, you should just be happy with what you've seen.
Well, and it's like, people will say, well, I'll say he's a franchise quarterback when he's a franchise quarterback. Okay. But I mean, that's like
what
saying
is a franchise quarterback?
Well, they're just basically they're going to wait until he's standing in the winner's circle on Super Bowl Sunday. And then they're going to begrudgingly be like, yeah, well, I guess he's a franchise quarterback. Well, I mean,
right.
I mean, so are you the guy that has to wait until the you're getting hit by hail before you'll say it will rain? I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
anybody can say after it's raining that it's raining. But the weatherman who tells you it's going to rain tomorrow has some value. I don't know. I'm not saying that people need to make predictions on everything, but it's like I kind of in that mode of like, hey, we've now seen it. Do you have the courage of your convictions and you believe in what you're seeing is real, or do you not believe in what you're seeing is real and you think that you still have doubts? And if you have doubts, that's great, that's fine. But to me, it's like, I don't know. I mean, I'd rather, I don't know. I have a higher opinion of people who would take a chance one way or another and say, I really believe he's this. And then if they're wrong, they're wrong. And if they're right, they're right. Then just wait until it happens and then just say,
Yeah.
Now I believe. Well, what now? Now you believe? I mean, there are a lot of people that believe right now in Josh Allen, but he's not playing well.
No.
He's probably not
he's
going
not
to the
playing
playoffs.
He's not playing like a franchise. I mean, he's immensely talented. We've seen him be amazing, but at the moment, he's not playing like a franchise quarterback. He's making horrible decisions. So what is a franchise quarterback? There's one Patrick Mahomes. There's one of them. That's it. Everybody else seems like they're kind of ebb and flow and up and down. And it's just the nature of the game. These guys are playing a position with chaos around them. And there's only a very small percentage of guys that are going to be elite. And then you have your guys that are franchise guys, right? That you're not going to move on from, that you're going to Dak Prescott, Kirk Cousins. You could think what you want to about these guys, but they are franchise type guys. They're going to be starters for 5 to 10 years on a team. And that's where I think Purdy can fall. Am I going to say he's Patrick Mahomes? No. I mean, come on. No, there's one Mahomes. He's not anywhere near as physically gifted as Herbert. It's just, I think there's just a standard people have that is just kind of, it's just not going to happen, right? He's not going to be Patrick Mahomes. Even Joe Burrow has been phenomenal. Burrow a lot of it's because he battled injuries, but he wasn't having a great year up until the past couple of games. Until then, it goes up and down, and I just think some people just have irrational expectations.
Well, and then just if you bring up a Herbert or a Allen, they'll be like, "Well, could you imagine what they would be in the Niners offense?"
Oh yeah.
Well, now we're debating something that we're never going to see, right. And it's just like I guess they would be great, but we don't really know. All right, 72%. This is a pretty good little story on Niners Nation. 72% of 49er fans that they polled believe that Steve Wilks' presence was the driving force behind the Niners' defensive performance last Sunday in Jacksonville. Do you agree?
On the sidelines? No.
Well, I mean, do you agree that him moving from the booth to the sidelines was the key factor in the whole thing?
No, I think they played some more man. If you watch that game, there were a number of times Lawrence dropped back and froze. So they were confusing him, disguising coverages and things like that, and allowing their guys to just do what they do. So we had Brian Baldinger on the show 2 weeks ago before this game, and we asked him flat out, Baldy, what's going on? And he said at the time, Nick Bosa is not playing like an elite guy, like Myles Garrett, or I think he used Danielle Hunter as another example. And he said Javon Hargrave hasn't been the past few games what they paid him to be. In this game, Nick Bosa was Nick Bosa. Javon Hargrave was Javon Hargrave. That had a lot to do with it too. For whatever reason, they were in a slump or things weren't working or people were just getting the ball out so quickly because of the coverage. They couldn't do what they were supposed to do. And basically what happened is the 49ers became the 49ers again. I think Bosa, he did have his best game of the season. He won Defensive Player of the Week. Hargrave was a problem from the first snap. And the coverage was better. They got Isaiah Oliver out of there, who's been struggling. Ambry Thomas played maybe his best game. You moved Lenore inside, and it was just, I don't think it had anything to do with where he was, but just the adjustments that they made. It's great that he can give everybody hugs and get pumped up. That's great. Everybody likes a hug, right? So I don't know, but it's, I think that was overrated, to be honest with you.
It's so funny because it's like I'm all over the map on this. I personally don't think it means anything because he didn't make the coverage tighter. He didn't make D linemen come off blocks. He didn't help guys not miss tackles. But then talking to Hufanga this week, he said, the communication is a big part of what we do. And if there was some poor communication or if things were getting lost in translation, that maybe, Steve being there had a bigger impact than I would, natural or normally give it credit for. To me, the biggest impact was adding speed. They took Isaiah Oliver off the field. He played 3 snaps. They played Ambry Thomas 46 snaps at outside corner. Steve admitted this week that, first of all, Ambry runs a 4.4 flat coming out of Michigan. Oliver is nowhere close to that fast. Ambry's better against the run than Oliver, according to what Wilkes told us yesterday, and that Ambry, plays tighter man coverage. So, to me, it's about getting your best athletes on the football field. And I watched Oliver, and it's like anybody that gave him a double move, he almost had to wrap him up. He doesn't have that kind of ability to mirror NFL caliber receivers up and down the field. He's to me, he's a slowish boundary corner who had one good year inside in Atlanta, and the Niners gave him a contract based on that 1 year. And I think Steve, by the way, Steve talks about him, was probably his internal advocate, because Steve, even yesterday when he was talking about Ambry, he's got to go back to, and Oliver is still going to do some good things. Stop it, Steve. He played 3 snaps. The other guy played 46 snaps. I get it. You don't want to put Oliver out to pasture. He's a proud veteran. He's a good guy. I talked to him. He's a great kid. He's great, but great person in the room. But let's stop pretending and covering people. Just admit that Oliver's coverage wasn't tight enough, and that Ambry Thomas's coverage is quite a bit better. I think that, to me, that was the reason the Niners were better, because when Lawrence dropped back to pass, he oftentimes had time to survey the field, but the coverage was tight. And even the announcers were saying, hey, look, that's a coverage sack there, because he looked right, he looked left, he had nowhere to go with it. And then here came the rush. So I think, and it's funny because I asked Shanahan the week before, Al, I said, you said your team was fatigued and slow. And I go, obviously they're coming out of the bye. They'll be less fatigued, but can you add any speed anywhere? And he's like, you got any ideas? And then I said, Danny Gray. And he's like, well, that's one guy. Well, sure enough, they made one lineup change, and they took out a guy who probably runs in the mid 4.6s for a guy who runs 4.4 flat. And suddenly their coverage was tighter. And I think that had a lot to do with them defending Jacksonville better than they defended Cincinnati. So, Cincinnati, for example, had 4 defensive backs that ran sub 4.3, and the Niners could not run to the edge at all against Cincinnati because they just kept beating them to the edges. So speed matters in the NFL. And he poo-pooed it and was like, didn't want to talk about it, and kind of made a joke about it. And then he went and did it. He did exactly what I said he ought to do, which is add more speed to the field in the form of Ambry Thomas, and look at the difference. So it's funny how those things work.
And I thought with Thomas too, they made an NFC Championship game with him starting at corner. So he's someone who has come in and done the job before. Interested to see. I mean, that looks like that is what they'll run with for the rest of the season. As long as it's successful. So I was happy to see it. He was kind of maligned last year, but he had done it in the past, and hopefully they can keep it up. And if that front four keeps doing what they were doing in the last game, and Fred Warner again looked like the best linebacker in the NFL. I thought he looked like he was shot out of a cannon that game, setting the tone, which is what he needed to do. And I thought he did that from the beginning.
Yeah, no, he absolutely did. We've got one super here from Bill Kennedy. He says, Brock is pretty good. He's only going to get better. I see you working there, Bill. Pretty good. Pretty good. That's a pretty good super chat. Thank you, Bill. Have a great Friday. What is your biggest concern now? Coming out, the Niners have righted the ship. They got a convincing win over Jacksonville. I think most Niner fans expect them to follow that up with a big win Sunday over the Buccaneers. They're a double-digit favorite. What's your main concern from the 49ers at this point?
Health. I think if we saw anything, the Niners are built on stars, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's good to have like 9 or 10 studs or whatever they have. But what I think we saw in the past 3 games is, previous to the bye anyway, is that when they lose a couple of these stars, they may not be the same team. And again, you're not going to be the same team without your stars. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's why health is so important. Trent Williams he was at 70% maybe in this last game, and he still looked like best player on the field. He's phenomenal. I know he had some pressures allowed and there was a hold, but he's so much better than everybody else, even at 70%. So he's so important. Devo, even if the numbers aren't there, just his presence and the fact that the defense has to account for him. Having Ayuk to go downfield, having McCaffrey to be the jack of all trades. Kittle's been phenomenal. He's on pace for over 1,000 yards this season after 3 really big weeks. So to have all those guys on offense, and then you need your horses on defense too. Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, Chase Young coming in there now, Hargrave. As long as those stars are on the field, the Niners are going to be really, really tough to beat. So to me, health is the one thing I'm concerned about, because if those guys are on the field, they're going to be fine.
How about Jake Moody? Where are you on Jake Moody?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, he scares the shit out of me.
Are you concerned about Jake Moody?
Yeah.
I mean,
yes.
In this last game, he didn't miss any kicks, but
it's always an adventure.
Yeah, I mean, the one extra point kind of moved from left to right, and it looked bad. And and then the field goal was inside the uprights, but man, by what, half a foot or something like that? It was, and it was straight, but it was, he kicked it right, right inside the goalposts. And he is a rookie, and he's had some hiccups. Where are you with Jake?
Well, in the one really big spot he had, which was to win a game, it was a wet field and everything else, but to win a game against Cleveland, he didn't do it. So the only way we're going to know if he's going to do it is the next time he gets a chance to have an opportunity. Right now, that is a huge question mark, especially when you're in games in the playoffs. And if you have to go to Philly, if you have to play a high-scoring game against Detroit, whatever it is, even Dallas, who they own, there's a lot of talent, a lot of talent on Dallas. It could still be a close game. So that is going to scare me until it doesn't anymore, if that makes sense. Until I see him get out there and actually make a clutch kick in the playoffs or just in another big spot, there's no way you could have any confidence in it. It just is what it is. But that's the bet that they made. That's the kicker they wanted to run with. They wanted to go with a rookie in a season that's very important for them. And it could have come back to bite them, sure, but we won't know until we know.
What do you say sitting here on November the 11th or November the 17th, I should say? What would you say is the Niners' weakest link?
Offensive line minus Trent Williams. That still scares me a little bit. I think the secondary I don't think is phenomenal, but we've seen the front seven can be so good. I think they can figure that out there. But to me, the offensive line, other than Trent Williams, that scares me, because we've seen them get blown up a little bit. We've seen McKivitz play well, but we've also seen him have issues. I even thought in this last game, I thought Jacksonville, there were a few times where they kind of blew things up. Feliciano played a really good game. Maybe when Banks comes back, he slides over for Burford, or they do what they did with Brunskill, where they split time a little bit. But Burford's been there could be some improvement there. That scares me when you get to, again, teams. I know they handled Dallas, but Dallas still has a very good front. Philly is phenomenal up front. And really, that's what it comes down to, I think, Larry. Like, it's probably going to come down to the Niners and the Eagles. And it probably is just, can you block the Eagles? Just like the Niners in the 90s. It was going to come down to the Niners and the Cowboys. So it's great. You're killing all these teams. Can you beat the Cowboys? And they eventually did. And I feel like that's sort of where they are right now. They're going to win their 12 games if they stay healthy. The offensive line should be able to get it done against almost all teams. But can they beat the Eagles? That's the question right now. So again, we won't know until we know. But to me, that's probably the weakest link on the team.
What do you make of them working out Jason Verrett? I mean, I was saying they ought to go for Jack Jones when the Patriots waived him, and it sounds like they never had a shot because the Raiders had a priority on the waiver and being an AFC team and being a bad AFC team, so that never got to the Niners. I wonder if the Niners would have put a claim in on Jack Jones, just because, I mean, he's a good corner and he's healthy and he's ready to roll. And then since that point, they showed interest in Jason Verrett. I'm not sure how to read that. I mean, is that because Verrett's just got the greatest feet of all time, and if he's healthy, he's a good cover guy? Or do you think that's a statement that, that Darrell Luter Jr. and Samuel Womack Jr. maybe are not ready to return? I think there's a couple more weeks left before they have to ultimately make that decision.
Yeah, and there's no experience with those two guys. Verrett, if he's healthy, what he can do. They've seen it. Verrett can come in and help. So it's probably just kicking the tires and seeing where is he physically. Is he the guy that he used to be? Can he come in and play if we need him to? Because again, with Thomas played really well, but if they were really high on Ambry Thomas, you know what I mean? Maybe why didn't he get in there sooner? Why didn't they use him more? So there may still be some trepidation there with him that Thomas can obviously, if he plays well, he can put that aside. But yeah, I think corner, it makes sense that they're kicking their tires to see if they can get an upgrade or just get another body, because when Luter hasn't played at all and Womack barely played last year. So it's one of those things where there's not a lot of experience behind those guys, and they're clearly not very confident with Oliver right now. So if they can get another body in there, someone they trust, I could see them kicking the tires. It made a lot of sense to me to at least take a look.
I talked to Luter in the locker room earlier this week, and he's like, "Hey, we'll have to see. I'm out there practicing, and we'll see if they activate me. I would love to see it because he's got great size. He's played press man. It's not a lot of guys struggle in man to man. This guy's got a whole career at South Alabama playing press man. He's a very mature guy. He's got his wife and his kid with him. And Womack, I thought, looked as good as almost anybody in camp this summer. And, obviously he had a knee injury as well.
Yeah.
But these guys are in the locker room. They're practicing. They're trying to get back on the field, and be activated. We'll see. I know they're young, but I don't think I would fear activating either one of those guys, but there is a little bit of an unknown there as far as what you're going to get out of them. That's no way
just
around
it.
it.
I mean, there's things that they like about those guys, obviously, and they see them a hell of a lot more than we do at practice and everything else. So the Niners have a pretty good sense. How many times they put in a guy and we're like, oh man, this is an issue. Who is this person? And they end up doing pretty well. So they have a good sense of who fits in their team and who can come in and get the job done. So if they inserted one of those guys, I'm going to say, all right, they've showed this coaching staff and this regime enough that they have confidence in them to step in, and you got to give them the benefit of the doubt in most places.
Yeah. One super here from Daza who says, how concerned are you about the 49ers motivation? They seem to play down to their competition, yet at times up to their competition. They seem to lose games they're overwhelming favorites in. What do you think, Al? I mean, I know what he's saying. It's like they do, like, they're an enormously talented football team. So if they get up for the game, man, I don't think there's a team in the league that can blow them out if they're up for the game. But if they're, if for whatever reason they take it lightly, I mean, the Cincinnati game, they almost had no ability to stop Cincinnati's offense at all. I mean, Cincinnati did everything they wanted to offensively throughout that entire game, and the Niners had very little resistance. They missed a ton of tackles, couldn't stop the screens, couldn't stop Mixon, couldn't stop the short passing game, and Burrow just couldn't stop Burrow running on third down. Burrow completed 18 or 19 passes in a row in that game.
Yeah.
I mean, it was watching that. I'm sitting there going, where is the 49er defense? But what do you think about this comment from Daza?
Well, I see what he's saying, because if you look at the Giants game, the Cardinals game, the Rams game, these were close games in the third quarter. The Niners ended up pulling away, and you're thinking, wow, the Niners should be up 45-0 on these guys. So I see what he's saying, but I think the 3-game losing streak sort of kicked them into gear where they said, okay, whoa. Like, we're all in this year. George Kittle even said in the preseason, like, listen, the window's closing. We know we're all not going to be around forever. They understand the assignment. And if they did get a little complacent, the 3-game losing streak kicked them out of it, I think, because they were taking a lot of heat over the bye. Guys like Nick Bosa, who no one ever says anything bad about, people were like, well, what did he take the money and he doesn't care? There was a lot of things being said. And then they came out and they responded. So I feel like they had their downtime. And look, the past 2 seasons, they started out 3-5 and 4-4. They kind of go through these spells, but they're 16-2, 2021 and 22, or in the second half of the season. And I think this year is going to be the same thing. They understand the assignment. They had their wake-up call. I feel like it's a tougher schedule, so they may lose to the Eagles. They may lose to the Ravens. They may split with Seattle. I don't know. But it's not going to be for lack of effort or lack of motivation or getting complacent. I still think they're going to win their 12-ish games. I still think they're going to be a really tough out in playoffs. They understand the assignment, and they have a lot of veterans who are going to keep everybody in line there.
How concerned are you that the Niners are going to have Adam Peters poached this offseason? Peters is likely going to be one of the more highly coveted general manager candidates for vacancies. There's already speculation that the Raiders may come calling for him. The Niners kicked John Lynch into a new he got a nice extension and a little bit of a new title. Do you think Peters, who's a Bay Area guy and is almost kind of, I think most people kind of assume that he's going to be the heir apparent to John Lynch. Do you think that's going to be the case, or do you think Peters is going to get impatient and go somewhere else before he gets his opportunity with the Niners?
I thought he was gone last offseason, and then he said he was staying. So I feel like unless something comes up that he feels like, wow, this is too good to pass up, sort of feels like there's a wink and a nod there that, yeah, he's going to be the heir apparent. He's going to be the next guy. So it's always a fear because I mean, look at the job he did in Denver and the job he's doing here with San Francisco. He's going to be a top candidate every offseason. But I feel like for him, it would have to be a perfect type spot, or he's the GM in waiting here. Maybe they kick Lynch up to a VP or something. Who knows? But it's going to be a concern again until it's not, I guess. But he's so good. And look at the talent this team has brought in late in the draft, and they're just loaded on, both sides of the ball, and they seem to be able to replace people and everything else. So he's going to be a guy that is always going to be top of the list that you have to worry about.
Niners had an incredible dominating win over Jacksonville, and now here's Tampa. And if you asked me last week going into that Jacksonville game, where were you concerned? I was concerned about the Niners offensive line's ability to block, Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker in that Jaguar defensive front. I also was kind of questionable as to whether or not the Niners could cover Christian Kirk, Calvin Ridley, and Evan Ingram. Now looking ahead to the Buccaneers, do you look at the Bucs wide receivers of Godwin and Evans? Are they better than what Jacksonville had? And how about Tampa's D line with Vita Vea and Shaq Barrett, Kalijah Cansey, Logan Wilson? Do you view that defensive line as better than what Jacksonville had last week? How do you compare the Jags and the Bucs wide receivers and D line?
Well, start with the D line, I guess. So Tampa's very good against the run. And when you look at their defense, so on paper, they've only given up 173 points this year, which is top 10. They're very tough to run on. They're tied for fourth at 3.7 yards per carry. So they're, with Vita Vea in the middle, he's really good. But where I see with Tampa Bay, and Jacksonville wasn't great at rushing the passer either. It was really Josh Allen or nobody. And Tampa Bay is kind of the same thing. The middle of the pack with sacks at 25. Pressure rate 21.9 is 19th. Here's the thing where I think the Niners are really going to succeed against Tampa Bay. In the they played 4 away games, okay? 3 in the 3 games that were against non-division opponents, they've given up 1,156 passing yards to the quarterbacks. Cousins threw for 344, Josh Allen 324, CJ Stroud 470. So you could really throw on them. They give up a ton of yak yards. They're 5th most in the NFL at 1,258, and 2nd most for the teams who have played 9 games. 49ers are pretty good at running after the catch. They're also, I saw Matthew Berry had a stat. They're tied for 3rd most TDs on deep throws. So I think Brandon Ayuk's going to have a big game. 47% of his targets are deep throws. So I can really see the Niners coming out here and throwing the ball a lot on them. They're going to run after the catch. They're going to try to blitz Purdy. I think Purdy can beat that. So I'm not really super nervous about their D-line, to be honest with you. Again, I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball super well, but they're going to be able to throw to offset it. Now, the reason I think why Tampa Bay, and I'm not going to sit here and be like, I've watched every minute of Tampa Bay. I haven't. But just looking at the numbers, they haven't given up a lot of points, even though they've given up a lot of yards through the air. Big reason for that is they forced 16 turnovers. So this team does force turnovers. They've have 8 fumbles forced and recovered, which is 2nd most in the NFL. So that's something you're going to have to look out for. And that's really the only way that I feel like Tampa Bay can stay in this game is if the Niners kind of beat themselves with turnovers and the like. I feel like they're going to be able to handle that defense, especially on the Tampa Bay being on the road. Now, the wide receivers, Mike Evans scares the hell out of me. He's the one guy that really scares me there, especially because, like you said, they had the secondary was terrific last week, but they've had some issues. So we'll see this year how he does. And Tampa Bay's done a pretty good job. Not recently. They've given up 11 sacks in the last 3 or 4 games. But before that, they only give up 5 sacks in the first 5 games. So actually, they've done a good job. Their sack percentage is only 5%, which is 5th best. And they've only given up 16 sacks total. So if they can protect in this game, I do worry about Godwin making things happen over the middle, going deep to Mike Evans. Again, just a play or two can change. So Jacksonville's been so out of whack this year offensively, even though they look good on paper with Kirk and Ridley and Evan Ingram and guys like that. Tampa Bay's wide receivers do scare me a little bit more because I think Evans is a stud and Godwin's better than I'd say Godwin's probably better than anybody Jacksonville has when he's right. We've seen Godwin have 115 catches and everything else. So, but Tampa Bay is kind of one-dimensional. They cannot run the ball at all. 3.1 yards per carry, that's it. They have 730 yards on 230 carries this year, so that's only 78 per game, and they're last in that yards per carry total. They're 24th in total yards because they can't run the ball. So I just don't see, other than turnovers or a big play to Mike Evans, just like kind of fluky things that can happen here and there. I just don't think Tampa Bay has enough to really hang with the Niners for 60 minutes.
I wonder one thing we saw from Wilkes last week that was kind of interesting. If you go the first 8 weeks of the year, the Niners defense blitzed 27.7% of the time, almost 28% of the snaps. Against Jacksonville, that number dropped to 14%. Do you think now with Chase Young that this is kind of what we're going to see the rest of the way, where they're really getting it done up front with their front four, and they're not very apt to blitz, and they're going to devote more bodies to coverage?
If you can't win up front with Bosa, Young, Hargrave, and Armstead, who can you win up front with? I mean,
Right.
You have 4 absolute studs there. So yeah, they should just try to get pressure with 4, and they should be able to do that. And if they can do that, you're going against Baker Mayfield, right? And I looked at his stats against the Niners, Larry. So he played against them in 2019 with Cleveland. The Niners won that game 31-13. He was 8 for 20 for 100 yards, 2 picks, 4 sacks, and a lost fumble in that game. He was atrocious. Bosa had 2 sacks, a forced fumble, a fumble recovery, 5 QB hits, and 2 tackles for loss. So he just destroyed Baker in that game. And then Baker played them again when he was with the Panthers. Niners win 37-15. He was 20 of 36 for 215 a pick and 4 sacks. So they've kind of owned Baker Mayfield in the 2 games that they've played him. And they typically do against QBs who, maybe more pocket guys or whatever. He's not a QB. He's had a lot of success against them. And I kind of see it happening this week. I know they haven't given up a ton of sacks, but they haven't faced a lot of D lines. They played Philly this year, right? Did they play Philly, Tampa Bay? I think they did.
I think so.
Yeah. So they lost that game 25-11. Trying to look at some other D lines they played that were really solid. The Saints have
they
a good
played
defense.
Tennessee with Jeffrey Simmons, who's he's a player.
Yeah, they only scored 20 points there. The Bills, they're beat up, but only scored 18 there. So I think against a really good defense like this, Tampa Bay is going to have some problems. This is another thing that could creep in. Is it a trap game? Because you're coming home from being on the East Coast and you have a game on Thursday, and then Philly's lurking after that.
Yeah, it's 3 games in 12 days for the Niners. It's not.
Yeah, so it's not. But I feel like that would maybe affect them more on Thursday night than this guy. I just don't think Tampa Bay is good enough, unless, like I said, the Niners come out flat or do something to beat themselves.
Yeah, and it's the NFL, so turnovers are the equalizing factor in every single one of these games. 2 last ones before we let you go. G. Martinez mentions Kyle's 34-16 after the bye. Then he amended that to say 37-16. What do you make of their schedule or their numbers? Because you saw that stat; it was circulating in the last week to 10 days. Their number pre-bye and their number post-bye, as far as records, night and day. They win at a much higher clip after the bye week. Why do you think that is? Is it you think there's something about the way Shanahan brings his team along, or something about any aspect of what they do that contributes to them kind of circling the wagons post bye week?
I'll be honest with you. I feel like if I had an answer to that question, I'd make a lot of money somewhere. I have no idea. No clue. They have so much talent, and it's been so frustrating, or it was frustrating, I should say, the past couple of years to see them start out the way they did, because you're like, what is going on? I do think last year Christian McCaffrey gave them a jolt in the arm and changed
Sure.
everything. I
Yeah.
really believe that. And then ultimately Purdy gave them a quarterback that was taking shots downfield and opened up the offense a little more, and they were finishing drives with Purdy. So you had two factors last year that happened where, okay, you're putting this running back who's a perfect fit for the offense. You're getting an upgrade at quarterback, and there you go. The year before that, for them to turn around, I mean, it was a Debo Superman act, right? He just had one of the all-time seasons for the Niners, and he put the team on his back. The defense, they have games here and there, like last year against the Falcons and against the Raiders, where they don't play well. But for the most part, the defense is so sound, it's going to keep them in games. I kind of felt in previous years it was that the offense just would get stuck at like 20 points. And you're like, how is this happening? And once you put McCaffrey in there, and now what you have Purdy in there, if they score 30 points this week, it's going to be the seventh time in 10 games, the most they've ever done it since joining the NFL in 1950 in the first 10 games. So it's you're seeing them do things that they haven't done in a really long time, scoring. And you have, Debo and Ayuk and Kittle, but McCaffrey and Purdy were upgrades to the offense that allowed them to do that.
It does kind of remind me, some of the older Niner fans will remember that the Niners, even in their heyday, when they won, 10 plus games for 16 straight years, if they would lose a game, it oftentimes would be early in the year at home in a game where they showed up flat, tried to kind of roll their jocks out there and win anyway, and it just didn't happen. Everybody remembers the Philly 40-8 Super Bowl season drubbing when Charlie Garner ran wild on them at Candlestick. But I mean, you can go back. There's several games where they didn't play well in the Montana and Young era early in the year. And I just kind of wonder if when you play in Super Bowls, when you play in NFC championship games, on the regular, maybe it's just harder to get up for September and October games that especially at home, if there's not a lot of intensity. Niners back in those days were road warriors, and they really kicked butt on the road. But sometimes they'd be flat at home. They'd be flat at home early in the year against sometimes a divisional opponent, sometimes just, some lesser team, and they just didn't fire. So maybe that has something to do with the pre-buy, post-buy stuff. One last one. Kansas, now the story of the day in football is that Joe Burrow's done for the year. Baltimore also lost Mark Andrews for the year in their win over Cincinnati. So big football game. Baltimore gets the win on Thursday night to kick off the week, but they lose their all-world tight end, and it seems like they always get banged up late in the year. And then Cincinnati. I thought Cincinnati was potentially the best team in football after watching them beat the Niners, and they may miss the playoffs. We may see Buffalo and Cincinnati miss the playoffs. And just as we're sitting here today in mid-November, it's looking very much like Kansas City, Baltimore, Niners, Eagles in the Final Four. Just from where I'm looking at it, maybe you see it differently. But who would you say, if the Niners were fortunate enough to, I think they're going to go to Philly and beat Philly. And who knows, maybe they'll wind up getting the home field advantage in the NFC playoffs and play at Levi's in the NFC championship game if they're fortunate enough. That's putting the cart way before the horse. But if the Niners were to get to the Super Bowl, who scares you more between Kansas City and Baltimore? And I bring this up only because, Baltimore's got the number one rushing attack in pro football. Lamar looks like he could be the MVP. Kansas City does have a great defense, and obviously Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, but they're not a perfect football team either. And it seems like there's at times they've shown vulnerabilities. They don't have great receivers, that's for sure.
No.
Who's scarier in your mind, Niners Ravens or Niners Chiefs in the bowl?
It's hard to ever not pick Patrick Mahomes just because he's Patrick Mahomes. But when you look at the team, like you said, the Chiefs are not the Chiefs this year. They're probably still going to win 13 games, but their receivers are not good. Um, the defense is good. They lost Nick Bolton. So as a team,
Is he out
Baltimore
for the
scares.
year?
I don't know if he's out for the year. I know he's out for a
Yeah.
while though.
He's a good player.
As a team, Baltimore really scares me, and I'll tell you why. The Niners we still have to see if they can stop the run, right? Jacksonville isn't a terrific running team or anything like that, but they've had a lot of issues stopping the run that didn't really come into play, especially because Jacksonville got behind so quickly. Baltimore can really run the ball. They got that Keaton Mitchell kid who's fast.
Yeah.
Gus Edwards can pound the ball. And then you have Lamar, who, my God, if he gets on the outside, and Niners have traditionally had issues with quarterbacks who could run like that. They have tons of weapons. The Andrews injury is huge. I think he broke his leg, so he could be out for the season. I saw he broke something. But you still have Zay Flowers and OBJ, and there's a lot of weapons there. So offensively, they scare me. And defensively, they're very good too. The terrific defense. Roquan Smith has been awesome there. They are a bad matchup for the 49ers. So I know Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes, but we've seen the Niners almost beat him in the Super Bowl. A couple things go differently, and they do. As a team, Baltimore really scares me. Now, Lamar Jackson has to prove that he could play well in January because there's been some hiccups there. But I would pick, I think if you right now, I would say Baltimore is a team to be afraid of. And Miami doesn't scare me because Miami hasn't beat anybody yet. When Miami beats a good team, talk to me, because they'll beat the Raiders 50-10 this week, and then they lose to Kansas City. They lose to the Bills. They tend to lose to good teams and destroy the bad ones. So I'm not worried about them per se. Baltimore is the team right now that I've circled that I'm like.
Yeah, in fact, old school Niners says, and I think Lamar's 18-1 against the NFC. Just they run the ball so well. That's the one thing. I mean, they run the ball so consistently. Al, we all love having you on. Tell people a little bit about your channel, how often you go live, and when you're going live next.
Well, we're not going live anymore because we're with Odyssey, and it's basically just our podcast download. So that's how we do everything now. So now we do the podcast. You could find it anywhere where podcasts are, and then our things will be on the 49ers Web Zone YouTube station after the podcast has been out for a couple of days. But yeah, check out the show. We had Cynthia Freeland on a couple of days ago. We had Brian Baldinger on the week before. We got some more great guests coming up. So yeah, just check it out wherever you get your podcasts.
And do you have a certain day of the week that you do it, or does it vary?
It varies. Like we try to do Sunday nights after games, but usually it's when we can get it. But we do 2 shows every week. So,
well, man, keep doing the great job. We appreciate you jumping in here. Give me your score prediction for Sunday before we say goodbye.
Oh, what did I say on the show? I think I said 31-17, so I'm going to stick with that. Niners.
31-17. That seems to be like kind of the sweet spot. I think a lot of people think the Niners are going to score 30 again, and I'm seeing a lot of 13s, a lot of 14s, a lot of 17s for Tampa Bay. It'll be interesting to see if the Niners can keep that momentum going, because let's be honest, they lose this game after then all last week's for naught. You know what I mean? You got to roll into. I feel good about their chances of beating Seattle and Seattle. I feel good about their chances of beating Philly and Philly, but they got to get this one. And these are sometimes the hardest games when you're expected to win. And Chris Godwin scares me. Evans scares me, just from the standpoint, Al, that even if you're covering those guys, even if the coverage is super tight, they're the kinds of receivers that have the kind of ball skills where they can catch it in a crowd and hold on. And they can do it all day. And we've seen it before. So I'm a little concerned about just, Baker hooking up, especially with Godwin, because Godwin's got the combination of, he runs a lot of those shallow crosses. He seems like, he's not the biggest guy. He's not really the fastest guy. And it's easy to look at him and go, what is he really getting done? And then you look up and he's got 14 catches. You know what I mean? It's just, he's that kind of a player. So anyway, Al, good luck with the channel. Thanks for jumping on with us. We appreciate you.
Appreciate you, Larry. Thank you.
All right. The great Al Sacco stopping by on the Krueg Show. I'd like to thank our sponsors, MarinAutoglass.com, 415-883-3030. If you're driving down the street and all of a sudden you got a cracked windshield, or heck, if you're in San Francisco and somebody shoots out your windshield and you need a brand new windshield, go call my man Saeed at Marin Auto Glass and he will do you right. 415-883-3030. Thanks to New York Style Italian Sausage. The best Italian sausage in the country is New York-style Italian sausage. If you're out here in Northern California, they're in every major grocery store out here. Thanks to Mojo Fantasy and Underdog Fantasy. Check that link in the description. Make sure you use the promo code Krueg, Krueg, and they'll match you for your first $100. Also, everybody who signs up at Mojo automatically is entered into a drawing to win a Bosa or a Purdy jersey on Thanksgiving night in our postgame show. So if you haven't signed up through Mojo, you definitely want to do that and qualify for a jersey. And not tons of people have. And we're giving away a real jersey in your size. And we could probably make it almost any player you want. So it's definitely motivation to go sign up at Mojo Fantasy. And, of course, thanks to Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Pig and a Pickle. Go say hi to Damon and Mary. Get the brisket. Tell them the Krueg sent you. Here's what their spot looks like in Marin.
So New York style sausage was started over 70 years ago. We are the largest producer of fresh Italian sausage on the West Coast.
What makes our sausage in New York style is really the recipe came from back east, from New York, from Connecticut.
If you look at all of our labels, there's maximum 4 or 5 ingredients, which we're really proud of.
There's no preservatives, no MSG, fresh in, fresh out.
The pork comes in fresh, goes out fresh. There's never any freezing throughout the process. We've always used fine quality cuts. We're never gonna deter from that. It's one of the reasons why our sausage is so good. I guarantee you put our sausage up against anybody else's from a flavor standpoint, no one will beat it, hands down.
Hey, do yourself a favor and do me a favor. Go buy a package of the New York style Italian sausage. Guaranteed you will love it, guaranteed.
All right, coming down the home stretch on the Krueg Show on this Friday afternoon. Kind of a dark, gloomy Friday afternoon here in Northern California. Will there be rain on Sunday for Niners and Buccaneers? By the way, if you haven't hit like and subscribe, hit like and subscribe. If you hit like, that just helps the algorithm and more people find the shows. And if you hit subscribe and hit that notification bell, every time we go live, you will get an alert on your phone. And we are sitting right now at 27,857 total subscribers, closing in on 28,000, 30,000 is just around the corner. We've added over almost 2,000 subscribers in the last 4 weeks alone. We've had over 1 million views of our content on the channel in the last 4 weeks alone, and close to 200,000 watch time hours. So thanks to Kev and all the work that he's doing on the video side. Thanks to all you guys as well. We're going to go live one more time today, I believe, right around 5 o'clock. The great Dave Lombardi will be in the house. He was down in Santa Clara today and has a whole new article out on Purdy and CMC. So we're supposed to visit with Lombardi today at 5. So look for that later on today. Thanks to all you guys for supporting the Krueg channel and the Krueg Show on YouTube. And have a great Friday. And tune in at 5 for me and Lombardi. Until then, peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get